The heat on Rebellion Highway was a physical weight, a crushing, oppressive blanket that smelled of melting asphalt and dead pine needles. For Sergeant Silas Graves, it was the scent of home. It was the scent of his kingdom. At 52, Graves was a man carved from granite and resentment. His uniform, though perfectly pressed, strained against a body that had once been purely muscle but was now thickening with the slow, heavy fat of middle-aged indulgence. He sat in his unmarked Dodge Charger, hidden behind a billboard that advertised a lawyer for DUI cases, a localized irony that Graves enjoyed immensely. He wasn't just a traffic cop in Creating County, he was the gatekeeper. To the locals, he was a necessary evil, a bully they tipped their hats to in the grocery store to avoid a ticket the next week. To the transients, the city slickers passing through on their way to the coast, he was a nightmare waiting in the blind spot of a rearview mirror. Graves tapped his fingers on the steering wheel, his eyes scanning the radar gun. He didn't care about safety. He cared about submission. He hated the new world, the world of electric cars, remote work, and people who looked like they'd never calloused their hands a day in their lives. He hated them because they had money, and they had freedom, two things Silas Graves felt he had been denied by a universe that owed him better. Then, he saw it. It was a ghost in the heat haze. A midnight blue Aston Martin DB11. It didn't look like it was driving. It looked like it was flowing, a river of dark metal cutting through the dusty beige landscape. It was a vehicle that cost more than Graves would make in 10 years. It was an insult. He checked the radar. 68 in a 65. Technically, illegal. Practically, ignored by every cop in the state. But Graves wasn't every cop. He shifted the Charger into gear, the engine growling a low, hungry note. "Gotcha," he whispered, a smile twisting his thin lips. "Let's see how much that paint job costs when I'm done with it." Chapter 2. The Architect of Law. Dr. Evelyn Vance loved the silence of the drive. As the newly appointed federal prosecutor for the Southern District, her life was a cacophony of court dates, press briefings, and the constant, dull roar of bureaucratic warfare. The Aston Martin was her sanctuary. It was the one place where she was not a symbol, not a target, and not a savior. She was just a driver. Evelyn was 45, though she looked 10 years younger. Her skin was the color of deep bronze, flawless and radiant even in the harsh afternoon sun. She wore a tailored cream linen suit that spoke of understated wealth and a pair of oversized designer sunglasses that hid eyes known in the courtroom for dissecting liars with surgical precision. She saw the Charger pull out behind her long before the lights came on. She checked her speedometer. 68. She checked her lane position. Perfect. She checked her hands. 10 and 2. A sigh escaped her lips, not of fear, but of exhaustion. She knew what this was. She had grown up in neighborhoods where the police were not guardians but occupiers. She had fought her way through law school, through the shark tank of private practice, and into the highest echelons of the justice system, yet she knew that to the man in the rearview mirror, she was just a demographic. The lights flashed, blue and red, the universal signal of command. Evelyn pulled over smoothly, the gravel crunching beneath the Ashton's tires. She put the car in park, lowered all 4 windows to show transparency, turned off the engine, and placed her hands visibly on the top of the steering wheel. She didn't reach for her license. She didn't reach for her phone. She waited. She knew the dance. She knew that any movement could be interpreted as a threat by a man looking for an excuse. Graves took his time. He adjusted his belt, checking the placement of his taser and his Glock. He wanted her to sweat. He wanted the air conditioning to bleed out of the luxury car and the suffocating heat of the highway to humble her. When he finally walked up to the window, he didn't look at her face. He looked at the leather interior. He looked at the digital dashboard. He looked at the expensive purse on the passenger seat. "License and registration," he grunted, leaning his forearm on the roof of the car, a deliberate violation of her property. Evelyn turned her head slowly. She removed her sunglasses. Her gaze was direct, calm, and utterly devoid of the fear Graves fed on. "Good afternoon, officer," she said. Her voice was a rich contralto, polished and firm. "I am going to reach into the glove compartment for my registration, and then into my purse for my license." "Is that all right?" "Just get him," Graves snapped. He hated her voice. It sounded like the judges who used to dress him down when he fumbled testimony. Evelyn moved with deliberate slowness. She handed him the documents. Graves snatched them. "Evelyn Vance," he read, mispronouncing it on purpose. "You know why I stopped you?" "I was traveling 68 in a 65 zone," Evelyn stated. "I was keeping with the flow of traffic, though there is no other traffic." "You were weaving," Graves lied. It was his favorite lie. It was subjective. It was unprovable. "And you look a little glossy-eyed to me. You been drinking, Evelyn?" "I have not." "I smell something." Graves sniffed the air theatrically. "Smells like wine. Or maybe something stronger." Evelyn's internal temperature dropped to freezing point. She knew exactly what was happening. This wasn't a ticket, this was a fishing expedition. "Officer," she said, her voice hardening slightly. "I haven't had a drink in 12 years. If you are accusing me of driving under the influence, I request a breathalyzer test immediately. Graves chuckled darkly. Oh, you request? You think you're in a position to make requests? In my county, we do things my way. Step out of the car. Am I under arrest? I said step out of the vehicle. Graves shouted, his hand dropping to his holster. Evelyn analyzed the situation. He was aggressive, irrational, and seemingly escalating toward violence. Resistance now would give him the physical excuse he craved. Compliance was the only path to survival, and subsequently to his destruction. She opened the door and stepped out. She stood 5'9" in her heels, almost eye level with him. The heat hit her, but she didn't flinch. Turn around. Hands on the hood. Spread your legs, Graves commanded. Officer, this is a non-standard procedure for a speeding violation. I don't need a law lesson from you. Graves shoved her shoulder, forcing her forward. The hot metal of the Aston Martin burned her palms. I need compliance. He patted her down. It was rough, invasive, and lingered too long in places that had nothing to do with searching for weapons. Evelyn closed her eyes, cataloging every touch, every second, every violation. She was recording this in her mind with the fidelity of a 4K camera. Well, Graves said, pulling a prescription bottle from her pocket. It was her medication for migraines. What do we have here? Pills. Driving under the influence of narcotics. That is a valid prescription for sumatriptan, Evelyn said calmly to the hood of her car. It is non-narcotic. It says, may cause drowsiness. Graves read the label, ignoring the rest. That's a narcotic in my book. You're going for a ride, sweetheart. He spun her around. He didn't ask her to put her hands behind her back. He grabbed her wrist and twisted it up between her shoulder blades with unnecessary force. Evelyn gasped, a sharp pain shooting through her shoulder, but she did not scream. You are hurting me, she said, her voice deadly quiet. I am not resisting. Stop resisting. Graves yelled for the benefit of his dashcam, cinching the handcuffs so tight they bit into her wrists. He shoved her toward the Charger. He didn't open the door for her. He pushed her head down and stuffed her into the back seat like a bag of laundry. The hard plastic seat was uncomfortable, the cage smelling of stale vomit and pine disinfectant. As Graves walked back to her car to inventory it, which Evelyn knew meant searching it illegal without a warrant, she shifted her position. She looked directly at the dashcam mounted on the partition. My name is Evelyn Vance, she spoke clearly to the camera. I am being unlawfully detained by Officer Silas Graves. I have complied with all orders. I have been assaulted. This officer is currently conducting a warrantless search of my vehicle. Graves returned 5 minutes later, holding her purse. He threw it in the front seat. Found a lot of cash in there, he grinned, getting into the driver's seat. Drug money, I bet. We'll seize that under civil forfeiture until you can prove otherwise. Which you won't. He started the car. You're in a lot of trouble, girl. You came into the wrong kingdom. Evelyn looked at the back of his thick, sweaty neck. You have no idea, she whispered. The ride to the precinct was a 20-minute monologue of Graves bragging about his power. He called his partner on the radio, using codes that didn't exist to sound important. He drove 10 miles over the speed limit. Evelyn sat in silence. She was breathing through the pain in her shoulder. She was visualizing the statutes he was violating. 4th Amendment, unreasonable search and seizure. 14th Amendment, due process. Title 18, U.S. Code, Section 242, deprivation of rights under color of law. When they arrived at the station, Graves hauled her out. He paraded her through the booking area. The station was small, run down, with flickering fluorescent lights and linoleum floors that had seen better decades. Got a big catch, Graves announced to the desk sergeant, a younger man named Miller who looked tired. DUI, possession, resisting, and look at the ride she had. Miller looked up, saw Evelyn, and paused. He saw the linen suit, the posture, the cold intelligence in her eyes. He saw the bruises starting to form on her wrists. Sarge, did you breathalyze her? Miller asked tentatively. She refused, Graves lied. I did not refuse, Evelyn said. Her voice cut through the noise of the station like a razor wire. I requested one, 3 times. Quiet, Graves barked. Book her. Put her in the holding cell with the others. I gotta do the paperwork on that cash. They took her fingerprints. They took her mugshot. Graves stood by, smirking, making comments about how she didn't look so fancy now. When they finally allowed her the one phone call, Graves leaned against the wall. Make it count. Call your pimp or your dealer. Evelyn picked up the receiver. She dialed a number she knew by heart. It wasn't a lawyer. It wasn't a family member. Operations desk, a crisp voice answered. This is Federal Prosecutor Evelyn Vance, clearance code Alpha 9 Victor. I am currently being held unlawfully at the Creating County Sheriff's Department. I have been assaulted and kidnapped under color of authority. I need an immediate extraction and a federal tactical team on site. Now. There was a pause on the other end, followed by the sound of rapid typing. Tracking your location, ma'am. We have your signal. State troopers are 5 minutes out. FBI field office is mobilizing. Stay on the line. Graves stared at her. The smirk faltered. Who were you talking to? Evelyn hung up the phone slowly. She turned to face him. The silence in the room stretched, heavy and suffocating. I was talking to the United States Department of Justice, she said. Graves laughed. It was a nervous, hollow sound. Yeah, right. And I'm the president. Get in the cell. He shoved her into the holding cell. It was empty, thankfully. Evelyn sat on the cold metal bench. She didn't cry. She checked her watch. 5 minutes. 3 minutes later, the vibe in the station changed. It started with a phone ringing. The desk sergeant, Miller, answered it. His face went pale. He stood up, looking at the receiver as if it were a bomb. Sarge? Miller called out, his voice trembling. It's the governor's office. Graves frowned. The hell? Tell him I'm busy. I can't tell them that, Sarge. They're asking about a federal prosecutor Vance. Graves froze. The blood drained from his face so fast it left him dizzy. He looked at the holding cell. Evelyn was sitting there, legs crossed, looking at him through the bars with the serenity of an executioner. Before Graves could process the thought, the front doors of the station didn't just open, they were thrown wide. 4 state troopers in full tactical gear marched in. Behind them walked a man in a dark suit, followed by 2 FBI agents. The man in the suit was David Sterling, the United States Attorney for the state, and Evelyn's direct superior. Nobody move, the lead trooper shouted. The station fell into a terrified stillness. Miller raised his hands instantly. David Sterling walked past the desk, past the stunned officers, and straight to the holding cell. He looked at Evelyn, saw the handcuffs still on her wrists, saw the bruise on her arm. His jaw tightened. Open it, Sterling commanded, his voice low and furious. Miller scrambled for the keys. He fumbled, dropped them, picked them up, and unlocked the door. Sterling walked in. Evelyn, are you injured? Shoulder dislocation, I think, she said calmly. And nerve damage in the wrists. Sterling turned around. He scanned the room until his eyes landed on Graves. Graves was backed against the filing cabinets, looking like a trapped animal. Who did this? Sterling asked. Evelyn stood up and walked out of the cell. She didn't point. She simply looked at Graves. Officer Silas Graves, she said. Badge number 4092. Sterling nodded to the FBI agents. Arrest him. Now wait a minute. Graves stammered, his voice cracking. This is a misunderstanding. She was speeding. She was on drugs. You are under arrest for federal civil rights violations, kidnapping, and assault on a federal officer, the FBI agent said, spinning Graves around and slamming him against the very counter where he had booked Evelyn 10 minutes ago. You can't do this. I'm the law here. Graves screamed as the cuffs clicked shut, the same cuffs he had used on her. Not anymore, Evelyn said. She walked up to him. She was disheveled, her suit wrinkled, her wrists raw, but she looked like a queen looking at a cockroach. You aren't the law, Mr. Graves. You are a criminal with a badge. And I am going to ensure you never hold a position of power over another human being for as long as you live. Chapter 6. The Ledger. The interrogation room was cold. Graves sat in the metal chair, handcuffed to the table. He had been stripped of his uniform. He wore an orange jumpsuit provided by the FBI transport team. Across from him sat Evelyn Vance. Her shoulder was in a sling. Her wrists were bandaged, but she had refused to leave until this was done. She placed a file on the table. I've been looking at your history, Silas, she said softly. The complaints, the resisting arrest charges that always seem to happen when the cameras malfunction. The seized cash that never quite makes it to the evidence locker. Graves didn't speak. He stared at the table. You thought I was just a woman in a fancy car, Evelyn continued. You saw my skin, and you saw my gender, and you decided I was prey. You decided I didn't belong in your world. I was just doing my job, Graves mumbled. No, Evelyn leaned forward. You were feeding your ego. You felt small, so you tried to make me small. But here is the reality, Silas. I worked for 20 years to get to where I am. I have put away cartels. I have prosecuted corrupt senators. I have fought battles you can't even imagine. She opened the file. It was a printout of the dashcam footage from her car, the one that uploaded to the cloud instantly. The camera inside my car recorded everything, she said. The audio of you planting the narcotics narrative. The footage of you twisting my arm when I was compliant. It's all here. There is no way out. Graves looked at the photo. He looked at her. The arrogance was gone, replaced by the crushing weight of reality. He realized that the 12 years he had threatened her with were now staring back at him. What's going to happen to me? He whispered. Justice, Evelyn said. You're going to lose your pension. You're going to lose your freedom. And you're going to be a convicted felon in the very prison system you helped fill. She stood up and walked to the door. Wait, Graves called out. I didn't know who you were. Evelyn paused, her hand on the door handle. She looked back at him, her eyes sad and cold. That, she said, is exactly the problem. You shouldn't have to know who I am to treat me like a human being. Epilogue. The reconstruction. The trial of Silas Graves was the most watched legal event in the state's history. The video footage was damning. The testimony of his rookie partner, Miller, who turned state's witness to save his own career, sealed the deal. Graves was sentenced to 15 years in federal prison. The judge, in his closing remarks, cited the betrayal of the public trust as the primary factor for the harsh sentence. Evelyn Bantz healed. The physical bruises faded in a few weeks. The psychological ones took longer. She sold the Aston Martin. The memory of the hood burning her palms was too vivid. She bought a sturdy, understated SUV. 6 months later, Evelyn stood at a podium in front of the police academy graduating class. She had been asked to give the keynote speech. She looked out at the sea of fresh faces, young men and women in crisp blue uniforms, eager to serve. "You are being given a weapon," she told them, her voice echoing in the silence of the auditorium. "And I don't mean the gun on your hip. I mean the badge on your chest. That badge has the power to take away freedom, to destroy reputations, and to end lives." She paused, making eye contact with a young officer in the front row. "There will be days when you are angry. Days when you are scared. Days when you feel like the world is against you. In those moments, you will be tempted to use that badge as a shield for your own ego. You will be tempted to demand respect rather than earn it." She gripped the sides of the podium. "Do not, because the moment you use your authority to belittle the powerless, you are no longer the law. You are the villain, and I promise you, there are people like me watching, and we will not blink." The applause was polite, but the silence that followed was profound. As Evelyn walked off the stage, she felt a lightness she hadn't felt in months. The system was imperfect. It was often broken, but on that highway, under the crushing sun, she had held the line. And sometimes, one victory is enough to change the world.